Hello, thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch this presentation. My name is Kendra and I'm a registered psychotherapist. I've been working with children, adolescents, teens, adults, and parents for over 12 years in primary healthcare and private practice. When I first started my role, I spent the greater part of my time with children one-on-one, using play and art to teach them about their emotions and how to manage them. However, over time, I realized that just teaching children the strategies to manage their big feelings wasn't working. This set me on a path to learn more about what was happening in children's brains and how to better support them. I'm a peaceful parent coach and trained in understanding the brain-body connection. Part of my practice is working one-on-one with parents to share my learning and teach them how to support their children in a way that many of us weren't parented as children ourselves. This presentation is divided into two parts. The first part is about 20 minutes long and focuses on the brain-body connection. The second part is about 40 minutes long and focuses on parenting strategies. Please feel free to pause your screen throughout. The slide printouts were also made available in the link that was sent to you to access these videos. Often I hear parents, teachers, and adults describe children's behavior as intentional, willful defiance, avoidance, or manipulation. There are many parenting strategies that support the use of positive reinforcement or negative consequences. These are all strategies I've suggested and even tried in my own parenting. The belief behind these strategies is that they will promote compliance from our children and as a result reduce the problematic behavior. Unfortunately, this doesn't work because if it did, we would have a lot of well-behaved kids. I'm going to share a way of understanding behavioral challenges and suggest strategies that focus on creating a connection with your child. The goal is that through connection, you will receive compliance because your child wants to make you happy. They value the connection that they have with you. Many of our approaches falsely assume that a child can self-regulate their emotions and behaviors when in reality they don't have the ability. This is known as the expectation gap. Behaviors that we see are on the tip of the iceberg. We tend to describe these behaviors as purposely misbehaving, attention-seeking, oppositional, defiance, testing limits, laziness, avoidance, poor parenting, or a disability. If we look deeper below the waterline, we can truly help children in a more comprehensive way. As with an iceberg, below the surface is a much larger piece hidden from view, but far more important. Here is the valuable information that can help us understand the why of children's behaviors, including clues about possible causes and triggers. So, when we see a behavior that is problematic or confusing, instead of asking, how do we get rid of it, ask, what is it telling us about the child? Dysregulation refers to the poor ability to manage emotional responses or to keep them within an acceptable range of typical emotional reactions. The wide range of emotions can include sadness, anger, worry, irritation, frustration. When a human is dysregulated, the smart part of their brain goes offline and the emotional part of the brain takes over to protect them from perceived danger. Dr. Dan Siegel developed the hand-brain model of flipping the lid to explain what happens in the brain.
We're going to use our hand to make a model of our brain. Hold up your hand like this. We start with our wrist and palm. This represents our brainstem. Now, fold your thumb into your palm, just like this. Can you do that? Your thumb represents the amygdala. These parts of our brain, our brainstem and our amygdala, are some of the earliest parts of our brain to develop and sometimes get the nickname of lizard brain. Now that we have our amygdala, wrap your fingers over your thumb to make a fist, just like this. These fingers represent our upper brain. Back here is our cerebellum. That keeps us balanced. Up top, we have our cerebrum. That helps us think and speak. And right up front, we have the prefrontal cortex, which helps us make smart decisions. This is our hand-brain model, and it's a great symbol of our brain. It's not exactly what the brain looks like, but it can help us communicate things about our brain and how we're feeling. Like, look at this. See how our cerebrum and prefrontal cortex wrap snugly over our amygdala, keeping it nice and secure? When our prefrontal cortex is in control, we feel happy, calm, and focused. We are ready to do our best learning. But we don't always feel that way, do we? Sometimes we feel upset, or angry, or frustrated, or too excited. Sometimes we even feel so silly it feels like we're losing control of our bodies. And that's okay. We all have times where our emotions take over and we have a hard time focusing and making smart decisions. When we feel this way, it's because our amygdala is in control. We can represent this by opening our palm to show our amygdala. It's kind of like saying, I flipped my lid and now my amygdala is in control. Right now, we can't even see the prefrontal cortex. Our hand-brain model gives us a great way to communicate which part of our brain is in control. And that's really important because when our amygdala takes control, we have a very hard time focusing. The amygdala is great at emotions, but not so great at making decisions.
One of my aha moments was when I learned about how the amygdala was triggered historically. So, back in the caveman days, children relied on their parents to be present and watching in order for them to be safe, say from the looming fear of a saber-toothed tiger. As a result, when parents were busy or distracted, there was a potential for danger, and hence the lid would flip to go into protection mode. Today, saber-toothed tigers aren't walking the streets, but replace them with a cell phone, and this might explain why the minute we get a telephone call, our children are desperate for something and we're interrupted. I don't know about you, but my kids could go hours blissfully playing while I work around the house, but as soon as the phone rings, there's a sudden need for mom. The other time you may notice this is in sibling rivalry, especially for your firstborn who had your full, undivided attention until their sibling arrived. Now there is this cute, tiny thing everyone is eyeing over, and all of a sudden behavior in your firstborn increases as an unconscious way to get you to shift the focus to them so they're safe and protected. This is a child-friendly version of the polyvagal theory, which was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. At the bottom of the ladder, you will see social engagement, also known as the green zone. When our lid is on, meaning our smart part can talk to our emotional part, we're in social engagement, feeling joyful, calm, present, curious, and ready to learn. When we flip our lid, we have the option to fight, flight, or freeze. Fight, or the red zone, is when we move towards the threat. As you will see on the right of the ladder, a fight response in children can look like yelling, swearing, hitting, biting, throwing, kicking, being controlling or demanding, blaming or deflecting responsibility, defiancy, or feeling offended. Flight, also in the red zone, is when we distance ourselves from the threat. The flight response in children can look like running away, being unfocused, fidgety, or restless, hyperactivity, being preoccupied or busy with everything except the thing they should be doing, procrastinating, ignoring, feeling anxious, panicked, worried, or overwhelmed. Freeze, also known as the blue zone, is when we're unable to move. The freeze response in children can look like shutting down, having a blank mind, the urge to hide or isolate, being verbally unresponsive or saying I don't know a lot, difficulty completing tasks, feeling zoned out or daydreaming, stuck, depressed, numb, or bored. It's important to know when someone has reached a freeze response, in order to get back to social engagement, they must travel through fight or flight. You can pay attention when your children are in a freeze response and notice if they go from shut down to angry to in a good mood. Submit is the response that is not shown here. Submit is when we do whatever we can to prevent the danger by being the good girl or good boy, by sacrificing ourselves. For example, I have heard kids describe to me how they submit to their bully by doing whatever they're told. Tie the bully's shoes, throw out the bully's garbage. A child once told me that their bully made them eat a stick. Children will also submit to their parents when they sense that mom or dad is in a bad mood. So now that we know the options to fight, flight, or freeze, let's learn what's happening in the nervous system during these responses. When we're in social engagement, our nervous system is working as it should. But when we move to fight or flight, we must prepare our body by increasing the energy. Blood pressure, heart rate, fuel, oxygen, blood clotting, and pupil size all increase. But the ability to relate to other people decreases, because who needs to have a conversation when we're in protection mode? The biggest thing people notice is the digestive system decrease. In order to conserve energy to fight or flight, our digestive system turns off so we can use the energy to fight or flight. So that bagel you ate for breakfast ends up sitting there, and this makes people feel nauseous, or they might have to poop or throw up. You might be thinking about those mornings when your kid says they feel too sick and they can't go to school. When we move to freeze, we must prepare by decreasing our energy. Facial expressions, the ability to make eye contact, intonation and voice, the ability to hear, and the ability to socialize all decrease and freeze. This is why it's not a good time to give your child a lecture or make them understand why their behavior is inappropriate. These are some identifiers to determine if your child is in social engagement. You can pause your screen to review. These are some identifiers to determine if your child is in fight or flight. You can pause your screen to review. These are some identifiers to determine if your child is in freeze. You can pause your screen to review. What tends to happen when a child has a behavior, we as parents flip our lids and become dysregulated, which then causes the child to heighten their behavior, which then dysregulates parents even more. There are 4 different ways a lid can be flipped. A real threat, like being bullied, violence, a fire, or being approached by a stranger. A perceived threat, or a worried thought. They generally start with what if. What if I get teased? What if I get in trouble? What if I don't know how to do the work? What if I get sick? What if my parents get sick? A perceived threat is just as stressful as a real threat, and sometimes even more stressful because others tend to ignore or belittle the stress. Neuroception, which we're going to talk about on the next slide, and the 5 domains of stressors from Dr. Stuart Shanker's Self-Reg, which we will also talk about on the next slides. The process of neuroception is automatic, and it happens without us noticing. It's when our nervous system scans the environment, situations, or people for danger and safety. Here are some examples. When an angry child meets an angry parent, the child neurocepts danger. But if an angry child meets a calm parent, the child will neurocept safety. When a child is running away from their parent and the parent is running after them, the child will neurocept danger. But when a child is running away and the parent calmly says, "I'm here when you need me," the child will neurocept safety. When a frozen child meets an angry parent, the child will neurocept danger. When a frozen child meets a calm parent, the child will neurocept safety. When a playful child meets an anxious parent, the child will neurocept danger. But when a playful child meets a calm parent, the child will neurocept safety. Dr. Stuart Shanker developed the Self-Reg model, which describes the 5 domains of stressors: biological, emotional, cognitive, social, and prosocial. All of these could cause a lid to flip. Stressors that affect our biological system take us out of optimal functioning. This can include noise, crowds, bright lights, smells, pain, poor sleep, too much visual stimulation, or not enough exercise. Look at the different biological stressors to see if you can identify any for your child or for yourself. Cognitive stress is caused by difficulty processing certain kinds of information. Cognitive stressors can include organizing thoughts, having too much homework, having to concentrate or remember information, being interrupted, or having challenges with reading. Take a peek at the different cognitive stressors to see if you can relate to any for your child or for yourself. Stressors in this domain include strong emotions, both positive and negative, and often these types of stressors interact with multiple stressors in other domains. Review the emotion stressors to see if you can relate to any for your child or for you. Social stressors relate to the child's difficulty picking up on social cues and understanding the effect of their own behavior on other people. Example stressors can include having to be at carpet time, being called out by teachers, a lack of friends or being excluded, having to do group work or public speak. Take a peek at the different social stressors to see if you can relate to any for your child or for you. Signs of prosocial stress, such as difficulty sharing, telling the truth, or understanding right and wrong, are often tied to a child's difficulty coping with other people's stress. Review the prosocial stressors and see if you can relate to any for your child or for you. Considering everything we've learned so far, we can begin to look at behaviors in a different way. So when a child is yelling, crying, or stomping, we can understand that they may be feeling overwhelmed by big emotions and in need of an adult to offer comfort and co-regulate. When a child is swearing, slamming, throwing, or hitting, We can understand that they're feeling overwhelmed and perhaps scared, and they need an adult to feel safe. I know the last thing that I need when I'm stressed is somebody to tell me to calm down. When a human is dysregulated, they require co-regulation from a caring person. When we can't process a big feeling, when we tell our children to calm down, or when they're away from us and they don't feel safe to express their emotions, they stuff it all into their emotional backpack until they can find a safe space to work through it. The concept of the emotional backpack can explain why some parents see behaviors occurring at home and not at school. Once children are allowed to feel those stored up emotions, the message of the emotion is delivered and the emotion can melt away. Remember when we spoke earlier about the different parts of the brain? The back part of your brain, represented by your wrist, responsible for survival, like breathing and heart rate, and the smart part of your brain, represented by your fingertips, responsible for thinking, planning, organizing, and so on. The brain develops back to front. While you're in utero, your survival brain is developing more rapidly, so when you come into the world, you can breathe, pump your heart, and survive on your own. The smart part of the brain doesn't fully develop until about 26 to 28 years of age. This doesn't mean you can't use the smart part of your brain, but it's not developed to its full potential. This explains why it's harder for children to put their lids back on once they've been flipped. It also explains why things seem like bigger deals to our children, like when the toast is cut the wrong way or we give them the wrong color cup. In early to mid-adolescence, brain systems that process emotions and seek rewards are more developed than the smart part. This explains why adolescents and teens are more likely to be impulsive, influenced by short-term rewards, and heavily impacted by their emotions. Some humans have bigger amygdalas and flip their lids more often. If the adult has also flipped their lid, it will be impossible for safety to be created. As a result, caring adults need to act as the substitute smart part for children throughout their development and even in the teenage years when risk-taking increases. I understand that it's easier said than done, asking you to stay regulated and then co-regulate your child when they flip their lid. Something in us wants to scream, "No, you're embarrassing me. People are looking. No, what am I doing wrong that you're having a tantrum again? No, why are you doing this to me?" Children often get upset because of their lack of experience and cognitive immaturity. And if we lose it, they look at us and say, if they can't keep it together, how can I keep it together? It's our ability as the adult with the fully developed smart part to stay calm when our child is upset. This ability helps them develop the neural pathways to calm themselves, which in turn leads to self-regulation. When we punish stress behavior, a variety of things can happen. It can break down the connection or attachment between child and adult, which leads to less compliance and impacts your future relationship with your child. Children can become stuck in the stress cycle, which leads to a constant feeling of being unsafe, invalidated, and unable to help themselves. If your child is in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze, they cannot be successful at school or home, which leads to more behaviors. Punishing can increase distress in the child's nervous system. Punishing stress behavior can push kids from fight or flight into freeze. When a child goes into the freeze part, this can be confused as two different things. It can be confused as compliance, where we assume that the child is being obedient when they're actually completely stressed and unable to learn. Or freeze can be confused as shutdown, assuming that the child doesn't care. Remember, in order to get to social engagement from freeze, we must go through fight or flight. So if we assume the child is being compliant or good and they're actually in a freeze response, they will still have to go through fight or flight before they can calm. For example, if you put a child into a timeout, say after they've hit their sibling, and you hook them up to test their nervous system, it would show that the child is completely dysregulated on the inside, but on the outside it looks like they're being completely compliant. Often the next question parents ask me is, what can I do instead of punishment? First, I encourage you to ask yourself if your child needs connection. Then, instead of thinking of your child as having a behavior problem, think about them as having a momentarily vulnerable nervous system in need of love and understanding. Remember, your child isn't intentionally giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. We're going to talk more about what to do instead of punishment in the next part of this series, but for now, you have completed the first part of Peaceful Brain Body Parenting.